All right, we're back here with another Mondays with a Mad Scientist with Jim Terrell, Quickblade Paddles founder and a bit of an epic stand-up paddle racer in his own right. Jim, what do you want to chat about today?
We're going to talk about board classes in SUP. You know, you're seeing all these different disciplines of SUP, and for the most part, there's 3 different board classes now. You have an unlimited class where basically there are no restrictions. Then there's also a 14-foot class. The boards can be anything up to 14 feet and shorter, but no longer than 14, and then a 12-6 class, you know, where they're up to 12-6 or shorter. And you've had different formats. If you think about traveling to these different events with your equipment, a 12-6 board is a little bit easier to travel with. So you're seeing like some races like the Peru ISA World Champs was on 12-6s, and I think a lot of that was to do with it being user-friendly to get athletes and get their equipment there. But in California, for example, you'll show up at a race and there'll be, you know, a lot of good paddlers there, but they're spread out between 3 divisions. And me personally, I would like to show up and race against all the top guys in one board class. So I like it when races are held and the race organizer will say, okay, look, you know, the money race is a 14-foot class. I like the 14-foot class because it's kind of in the middle. Board manufacturers have put a lot of money into producing tooling and molds, you know, for production boards that are molded or tooled for 12-6 and 14. So to eliminate one of those board classes right now, you know, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how it all sorts out with the industry. But I think for the longevity of the sport, I would like to see it come down to maybe 2 board classes at the most, which brings up another subject. In stock, you know, I come from a canoe racing background where you have more than just a length requirement for boards or for the canoes. You had all sorts of restrictions with like in marathon canoeing, for example, they have a minimum width requirement at the 3-inch waterline. They have a minimum bow height, a minimum tail height, all these other restrictions. In Olympic canoeing, they had rules at one time for a minimum beam, but the canoes became sort of diamond shaped and sort of eventually swooped gunnels that made them sort of silly looking to where they eventually got rid of the width requirement. But they had a minimum weight requirement, and the advantage to a minimum weight requirement is that it allows for a board to be made out of like fiberglass, for example, as opposed to carbon, to where it's more affordable for your average guy to buy a board that's still pretty competitive with a very elite model. So in the stock class, for example, I'm in favor of and would like to put it out there. It's debatable, of course, but I would like to see a minimum weight, and it could be established early on. In fact, I made a board control fixture that we were taking to some of the races this year that will check length voluntarily by the paddlers, and get a width of the board at the 3-inch waterline within a foot from center, and the weight of the board. We'll weigh them, and then we'll find out what the very lightest boards are on the market, production boards specifically, and try and maybe pin down what would be a good you know, minimum weight requirement. But you know, boards can be made at 12-6 as light as 10 pounds. I mean, the technology is there. On a 14, you know, as light as 12 or 13 pounds. But they would start to get to be made out of pre-preg and honeycomb core and some materials that are pretty expensive to produce, to where only certain people have the technology to build them. They'd be pretty, you know, it would outprice the average consumer to be able to afford or even want to buy one. So I think that having a minimum weight requirement may have its place, as well as a width requirement, to where, you know, I don't want to say that the boards have to be so fat that anybody can paddle them, but at least restrict it so that it doesn't become so unpaddleable and so skinny. You know, in the ocean, you need some width, obviously. So in Hawaii and places like that, you know, it wouldn't be required. But like, there's so many races now in flat water where the boards, I predict that they're going to get so skinny and so narrow that only a handful of people will really be able to balance them. So that's my perspective.
All right, well, give us a bit of a bold prediction. Right now, I've got the 12-6 stock class, the 14-foot class, and the unlimited class. In, say, 5 or 10 years, what are we going to have?
In 5 or 10 years, I think it may narrow down to just a 14-foot class and an unlimited class. But for ocean surf-specific conditions, there may be a shorter board class. There could be a 12-6 class. But I think for the average race that's in North Carolina, the Midwest, Europe, I'd like to see it just get narrowed down to a 14-foot class and an unlimited class. You know, unlimited has its place because we don't want to restrict, you know, how fast can we actually paddle a craft standing up, you know. So from what I've witnessed in California, you know, we had a few races recently in calmer water where the turnout for Unlimiteds was, over 10 or 12. But where you see the masses, in fact, even in the Waikiki Quicksilver race today, there was 72 contestants in the 14-foot class, which I believe was the biggest class. Stock was a little less at around 50, and then the Unlimited was a little less than that. But I kind of think the 14's in the middle, and it'll satisfy the majority of the people at 14.
All right, sounds good. Good insights as always. Well, thanks for having a chat with us on SupRacer.com. Another great Mondays with the Mad Scientists. And again, big thanks to Quickblade Paddles for letting you out of the lab. Once again, Jim Terrell. Cheers.
Thank you.